We are now streaming live.
Welcome, everyone. I'd call this meeting to order for November 12th, 2024, meeting of council, and we'll be beginning at 4:30. This meeting will be held in a hybrid manner where members of council, staff, and the public can participate electronically. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available on the township website. Notice is hereby provided that under the authority of the Municipal Act 2001, and in accordance with Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, that all information obtained is considered part of the public record. All rules apply to the meeting as if everyone is attending in person, and if there is a problem with the technology impacting the proceedings of a meeting, the meeting may be recessed. So at this time, I would ask everyone to rise for the playing of the national anthem. We acknowledge that we are being hosted on ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Mississauga, and Onomama people. We acknowledge and welcome the presence of all Indigenous people, including the Métis, Inuit, and other First Nations from across this vast land, who also makes this place home. The lands we are on today are recognized in the Douro Wampum, Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 27, and the Crawford Purchase. So the first item up is confirmation of the agenda. Do we have a mover? Councillor Broderick, do you mind just reading it?
We recommend that the agenda of the November 12th, 2024 meeting of council be confirmed as circulated.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Willis. Any comments? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof for open session. Are there any to declare this evening? Being none, we would take a motion to move into closed session, and if the mover could just read the motion as well. Councillor Parks.
Thank you. I would recommend that council now move into closed session to consider a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, potential disposition of land, and personal matters of an identifiable individual, including municipal employees, non-union compensation review pursuant to section 2392 C and B of the Municipal Act.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Budrick. All in favor? Motion is passed. We will now go into closed. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We'll reconvene the meeting at 6:06. I apologize for being a little bit late. We started our meeting at 4:30. We have been enclosed and we just finished up the items. So that's why we're just a little bit late start coming back to get going again. At this time, I would also like to just note that Councillor Innes did send his regrets for the meeting this evening, so he will not be attending. And with that, we'll move on to rise and report from the closed session. So council, we had two items in closed session. Both of them will be brought into open. So the first one was proposed land disposal and acquisition with a recommendation attached to it. Is there a mover to bring this into open so that we can adopt it in open? Councillor Broderick.
I would move the recommendation that council be directed to place the following motion before council for an open session. That the report from the clerk's division dated November 12th, 2024, proposed land disposal and acquisition, McDonald's Lane, Amherst Island, be received, and that council directs staff to advertise its intention to declare the land surplus in accordance with bylaw 2004-33, and that staff bring forward a report with recommendation on declaring the land surplus and the sale of the lands.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Willis. Any comments? No. Call the question. All in favor? Motion has passed. The second item to come forward was the non-union compensation review. There is one item to come forward from that. Is there a member that wishes to bring that into open? Councillor Broderick?
I would move that the clerk be directed to place the following motion before council for consideration in open session. That council receive the non-union compensation review as presented in closed session and the financial implications be included as part of the 2025 budget.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Parks. Comments? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. That concludes our rise and report. Our next item is presentation. We have Ms. Chenier, the Director for the Prince Edward, Lennox and Addington Social Services. And if you can just come up to one of the chairs there, just make sure the red light is on the mic. And thank you for coming to share the information with us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. If you could bring up the presentation, please. I'll bring it closer. Thank you.
Soft spoken.
Yeah, I am. Okay, so this delegation is really regarding an affordable housing project that the county is currently looking at. Next slide, please. So PELIS, which is the Prince Edward, Lennox and Addington Social Services, which is part of the county, we are responsible for delivering and supporting rent geared to income housing in the county. We have the local housing corporation, which is the buildings that we own and operate, and we also support 5 nonprofit housing providers with funding each on a monthly basis and yearly basis, operational supports as needed. We also manage rent supplement programs, which is a rent supplement with a private landlord. So the person pays a rent geared to income housing rent amount, but it's in a private dwelling. So then PELIS pays the difference between the rent geared to income and what the market rent of the unit is. And then we manage the centralized wait list. So anyone applying for rent geared to income housing in the county applies to the centralized wait list. They choose the buildings that they would like to apply to. And we manage that list for the local housing corporation as well as the 5 nonprofit housing providers. We also provide affordable housing options periodically as funding is available. There's the home ownership program, Affordable housing builds, we did one in Tamworth 2 years ago now. There was 8 units, 2 of them rent geared to income, with 6 being affordable housing. And then we also manage homelessness programs through the homelessness prevention program. We support community partners to provide supports to homeless individuals or people that are precariously housed or soon to be unhoused. Next slide, please. So as you can see from the chart, we administer a total of 300 rent geared to income units in Lennox and Addington County, plus another 115 in Prince Edward County. We maintain a centralized wait list, and right now there are a total of 558 households on that waiting list for subsidized housing. This chart has a breakdown of the number of units in each of the lower tier municipalities. So for, I'll speak just to Loyalist Township. Right now, there are 0 rent geared to income housing units managed by Pellis. So there's no local housing corporation visibility within the township. Most of the units were built back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and there just hasn't been anything built since then. And there's definitely a need in Loyalist Township. We do, however, have 48 nonprofit RGI units. So that's nonprofit housing providers who provide rent geared to income housing and that we support with their operational expenses and operating supports. Rent supplements, we only have 13 rent supplements clients within Loyalist Township. And right now there are 88 people on the waiting list looking for an affordable place to live in Loyalist Township. Next slide, please. So one of Lennox and Addington County's strategic priorities is safe, affordable housing. And one of the action items is to prepare 2 to 3 shovel-ready projects. And that's really kind of where we're at right now. Next slide, please. So at the June 19th meeting of council, there was a motion that was brought forward and approved that council directs staff to prepare a report outlining options available for the county regarding building more high-density social housing. Next slide, please. So as a result of that motion, a working group was established with members of Prince Edward, Lennox, and Addington Social Services, our infrastructure services and property services departments, finance, as well as economic development. And from there, we were able to identify the estimate as to what a high-density building would cost. And in our example, we used 42 units. And then we looked at what could that mix of units look like? So affordable, rent geared to income housing, or market. We also looked at the types of units that were needed within the county. 1-bedrooms are definitely the most sought after, and according to the housing needs assessment. So that's what we based the building on, is 42 1-bedroom units. We reviewed existing county properties to see if there were any suitable properties, and there really are none. We identified potential funding options and the estimate of not only the capital costs, but also the ongoing operational costs as well. Next slide, please. So we presented a report to council at the September meeting, and this report provided all of the information that I just went through, that the working group went through. And the estimated cost of this type of building is 15.7 million. And that's just to build it. And then it has an annual operating cost of approximately 1.1 million. Next slide, please. So the staff report also outlines some funding options that are available to the county to apply to if this project is to move forward. One of them being the Affordable Housing Fund New Construction, and the second being Apartment Construction Loan Program. Both programs are CMHC programs, which means they're Canada-wide. So the competition for those programs are very, very fierce. I will say that not a lot of smaller municipalities have been all of that successful in achieving or being awarded funding. However, there's certainly programs that we would apply to. And if we were successful, it would then reduce the capital cost. It would not, though, reduce any operational costs moving forward. It also would likely impact the mix of units. Right now, we based it on affordable housing and market rent housing. So if there were any funding from CMHC as an example, there probably would have to be a component of rent geared to income housing. And that would then increase the operational costs on a yearly basis, but reduce and potentially the capital costs, the original outlay. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, and I went through that slide. You can go to the next slide again. Thank you. So the following resolution was passed at the September 18th council meeting, that council directed staff to explore a partnership with one or more of the county's lower tier municipalities in order to build this potential building. And that's where Loyalist Township Council received a letter from the CAO from the county, looking to explore a partnership between the county and the township in order to build more housing within Loyalist Township and the other townships as well. Next slide, please. And that's all I have. So I would be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions this evening? Councilor Broderick.
Thank you, and through your worship, thanks for the presentation. Just a few general questions to maybe give me a better picture of things. What do you mean by safe housing? What does that mean, like safe, that word? It just,
Do you mean in terms of safe and affordable?
well, the safe part of it more than the affordable, but
It's
however you want to word it.
Yeah, it's a secure place that someone can call home. It's safe, it's up to code, it's built well, it's managed well, all of those kinds of things.
Thank you. And if I could continue, just a few more general questions. Right now, if a person was on the waiting list in Loyalist, one of the 88, is that a family unit or a person?
Through the mayor, it could be either.
Okay.
So the waiting list doesn't really distinguish between the two. So Loyalist Township, through the nonprofit housing providers, have both single units as well as family
Okay.
units.
So in that, can you give me an idea of how long maybe it was 88 on the list? Like how much of a difference would this make if it was in Loyalist, the 44 units?
I think it would make a big difference. So right now, the waiting list would be definitely 3 to 5 years
Okay.
for a unit. So it would probably have a good impact.
And just in terms of the demographics of a group, are we looking, when you said that it's a single unit, are we looking at seniors, younger people? Is it just a mishmash of every demographic possible?
Thanks for that question. So the eligibility for rent geared to income housing really is based on the application date and the size of the unit. So if you're a single person applying for subsidized housing, then it would be a one-bedroom. They don't really do seniors dedicated buildings any longer, so there could be some seniors in there. Could be some younger people, so there would be a mix.
Okay, and just the last one. When your one chart there had, so you had Greater Napanee, Loyalist Township, Stone Mills. When a person or a family applies, would they apply within their own municipality, or is it the whole county that, I could be applying in Amherst, but end up living in Napanee?
Yeah, great question. So anyone in the province can actually apply to any service manager in the province. So, and each application lists all of the buildings, include ours as well as nonprofits, and they would select what buildings they wanted to live in. So that means they're choosing the locations they would like to live in. So if somebody didn't want to live in Northbrook, as an example, they would not select the Northbrook building. So they would end up in a building that they've selected.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. Through the mayor, just as a follow-up question to Councilor Broderick's question. So if they apply for more than one location, is that based is it one application specifying those? So I guess what I'm trying to ask is that 88 applications or the people that are on that list at this point in time, they could select 4 or 5 different locations, but it doesn't change that 88. It's based on the application.
Yes, that would be correct. So it's one application. They select all the different buildings that they want to live in. And the 88 for Loyalist Township are individuals or families that have selected to live in Loyalist Township.
Just a couple other follow-up questions. Based on my experience, because I've dealt with the rent supplement program before, and typically in the past, there's been more demand for one-bedroom units, which I think you commented on. So do you know what the proportionate share is in the applications for Loyalist Township as to whether they're a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom or a three-bedroom?
I actually don't know that off the top of my head. I'm very sorry. So
Sorry, one more? Yep. Are we continuing to see pressures on the like a rent supplement program based on the market being a low vacancy rate with private landlords?
that's a great question. Absolutely, yes. There are definitely, rent supplement is definitely a much more economical way to go because we're only paying the difference between what the person can afford to pay and what the actual rent is. However, with the rents increasing so much over the last couple of years, it's really putting pressure on the rent supplement program in that we're able to do less rent supplements because it's costing us more to do. And then the other challenge is a lot of landlords are kind of getting out of the business of renting because of the problems with landlord tenant board and those kinds of things. So it's been a real challenge.
Through the chair, thank you for your presentation. I just want to make sure I understand. So what the ask is tonight is that we would support looking at having a shovel-ready project so that when grants are available, we're ready to go. Is that what we're looking for?
So I think I really can't answer that specifically because it will be up to county council's will
Mhm.
as to whether or not they proceed with or without funding, because funding is so hard to come by. If you want to increase housing, you almost need to commit that, yes, we're willing to spend the money to do it. And hopefully we will get provincial funding in order to reduce those costs. So I think really what we're asking for is if there's a partnership of opportunity for just so say donation of land, waiver of development fees to reduce those capital costs and outlays so that housing can be built and really just maximize funding, maximize opportunities for people from Lennox and Addington County or people who live in Lennox and Addington County. Hopefully ease up a little bit on the vacancy rate with whatever kind of building gets built. And we're not, sorry, I should say, I'm not tied. Council may be very tied to that 42 units, but I think that's flexible. I think it depends on the land. I think it depends on the township. I think it depends on the need. So it's really in the very beginning stages. So that 42 unit building at a cost of $15 million is really just, it's going to cost basically $500,000 per unit to build. So, and is council willing to do that, to move forward and all of those kinds of things? But it would really help to be able to have the partnership to be able to move forward. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Another question. So I'm reading constantly about tiny home villages that are being built and the benefits of those. And we've seen the Veterans Village that's in Kingston now. Are we looking at an apartment building because that's the most efficient model, or are we looking at alternatives as well? And my second question, so I can get them both in, is are there opportunities to partner with groups like Lions Club, Kinsman, Rotary groups that would also be a partner in this?
I think we're definitely open to partnerships for whoever wants to step up to help with the housing situation, because as we all know, it really is in crisis mode at this point in time. So I think we're definitely open to partnerships. We did not look at the tiny home model only because the homes, you still need all the infrastructure. You still need the water, you still need the sewer lines, you still need, the cable and the internet and the phone lines and all those kinds of things. So those costs really are not reduced. And then depending on the tiny home, whether or not they have bathrooms and kitchens built into them, because there's like tiny, and then there's tiny that have those things. So then if they don't have those things, well, now you need common spaces that people can go to access water, washrooms, showers, and those kinds of things. And then that's a whole different kind of kettle of fish in terms of maintenance, upkeep, cleaning, all of those kinds of things. So really, we have looked at a traditional model because whatever we build, we want it to be quality. We want it to last for a really long time because we know building is expensive. So whatever we build, we want to have it for 50 or 100 years. And because that'll really benefit the community and the members of the community.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, if I can just expand on the one question. The motion that went through county council was to explore partnerships with one or more counties' lower tier municipalities. So just to expand on what Lynn said, right now, they're just trying to find out what might be available and not necessarily the 42, and it could be broke up, like Addington Highlands, if they had a piece of property and said they only need, it'll fit 8, that could be put in the mix too. It's one building or more, because right now they're just in the investigative stage to see what's available to be able to proceed any further working towards shovel ready. And then, of course, the funding is a whole nother bottom right there. Yes, is there another question?
Yes.
Okay.
More for you as
For
county
me?
representative. if that's
Okay.
Appropriate.
Well, I'll try. I've got backup.
Just, has the county looked at vacant buildings, like, comes to mind, like H.H. Langford School down on County Road number 9, south of Napanee, those type of things, old churches that could be converted as opposed to looking at building.
Those, most now, going from what I recall, most of them are privately owned now, and a lot of them, like the school is in disrepair.
Yeah.
Now, so basically they're looking at municipal property right now, what might be available. And then the county could look at private. It's just, they're looking right now is what municipalities may have available that we may be able to assist with, either donating it, helping with the development charges and things like that to help the capital cost. If we have to go out to buy private property, the capital cost will just go up. So they're starting at the most economical right now. Does that?
Yeah, I think that sums it up really well. And we also do look at, recently we looked at a row of townhouses, opted not to buy, just because when you get into older buildings and there's accessibility issues, there's lots of people who are on the waiting list with disabilities. It's very hard to convert those and to make them accessible, even within our own buildings. It's the older buildings, it's a huge challenge to make them accessible to people. So this is really just a way to try and get accessible. Yes, it would be new without a renovation, which is always easier than renovating sometimes. But we have looked at some of those other options and they haven't been financially viable to do the renovations to bring them to where we need them to be so they last another 50 or 100 years. Yeah.
Back through to you then, sir. Has our representatives to county council put forward any options to the affordable housing people of opportunities or parcels of land in Loyalist Township yet?
No, the request came to council, to the township. And part of the recommendation this evening, if it passes, is that council direct staff to bring back a report on the proposal. So they would bring back potential locations that would have the sizes and everything as well, that then council can decide if we want to present that. Okay. Any other questions at this time? Being none, thank you, Ms. Chenier, for providing the information. That was very valuable for our township to be able to move forward. And I should have mentioned at the beginning that Ms. Chenier was requested to come here simply for what we just did. I believe it was very valuable. It provided a lot of information, also gave us an opportunity to ask the questions to make sure we're moving in the right direction and how we should proceed. So with that, we do have a recommendation before us. Is there a member that wishes to put a motion on the floor? Councillor Willis.
I move that the presentation from Lynn Chenier, Director of Prince Edward Lennox and Addington Social Services regarding housing services and affordable housing be received, and that council direct staff to bring back a report on the proposal.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Parks. Mover, any comments?
Only that I know that housing is a serious issue in our community and all communities, and I think that one of the solutions is for governments to step up and take a role.
Thank you. Seconder,
Just thank you to Ms. Chenier for bringing the report and look forward to hearing more.
other comments? Councillor Broderick.
Just looking at the housing services chart that, you know, I know in Loyalist 88, and if a project could come through in Loyalist, if it was recommended that that would significantly reduce that. And that in my 42 years here in the township, we haven't seen much in terms of affordable housing.
True. Any other comments? Seeing none, call a question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Meetings, so that moves us to open forum. So 15 minutes of the meeting has been set aside for open forum. Any individual may address council regarding an item on the agenda, excluding matters under the statutory public meeting section on the same agenda. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. Anyone wishing to speak can register in advance, and we do have one. Or they can use the raised hand feature if they're in Zoom, and I will open it up to the room here as well. So with the one, if there's anyone else that wishes to speak in the council chambers or on Zoom, would like to address council on the matter, like I said, I will call for the option in the room here, and then if anyone on Zoom is interested, please be ready to use the raised hand feature so that we can bring you into the meeting. So we have Keith Lalonde, and it's regarding the water and sewer rate study and the financial plans. If you wouldn't mind coming forward, again, just make sure, push the button so that the red light is on, and state your name and address and provide us with your information. There is a clock on the screen that will do a countdown for the 3 minutes.
Keith Lalonde, address is 131 Manor Road, Bath, Ontario. My wife and I moved to Bath about 15 months ago from Mississauga. Being new, one of our neighbors mentioned how expensive the water was here. Coming from a big city, I thought, well, how expensive could it be? It turned out twice as expensive. As I've always been actively involved previously in my communities everywhere I've been, I reached out to my local representative several times, in fact, inquiring on reports and data that would provide transparency into these rates, but did not get a reply except that they were ill and not able to get back to me. So I decided to sit on a few council meetings, review them monthly, all the agendas, until this topic was tabled so I would have the opportunity to speak. Last month, staff put forward a recommendation. Could you show my slide, please? The staff recommendation 2786, where on page 24, there was a graph. To the slide, please. Yeah, that showed all the rates for all the different municipalities. First of all, I can't help but feel that some of these look handpicked. Some were good choices for our area, and I get why they were chosen, but you can see that we're near the top of the scale. Oops. We're near the top of the scale. Before you tonight is a recommendation 11.2, the water sewer user rate stability study and financial plans. This study proposes an increase of approximately 5% per year for the next 10 years to cover the various operational costs. Next slide, please. Page 33, figure 12 of tonight's report shows that this will mean to the typical user an increase. Click one more time, please. There's animation. Yeah, I thought I was presenting. There's an increase from 1,500 approximately now to in 10 years over 2,500. That's a 67% increase. Let's let that sink in for a little bit. This recommendation is to receive, report, approve the financial plan and to be filed by November 15th, which again, the timing of this seems a little suspect that we don't have a lot of opportunity to raise this for public consultation on such a contentious issue of the water prices. All that being said, it's probably too late for the council to reject this recommendation, but I would like to propose an amendment. I would like to ask that the council recommend to staff a new study. The purpose to review and compare our operating costs with two of our nearest municipalities, Napanee and Kingston, with the goal of understanding why their rates are so low and how we can move toward reducing our rates. Did I have the 30 seconds or 12 seconds to finish because of the slide problems? Thank you. Rates so low, and so we could move towards reducing our rates to be more in line with theirs. The findings would need to be open, transparent, so both council and the residents be fully informed of our current dilemma and have a clear path forward. A steady increase of 5% per year for the next 10 years is not that path. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward. Look in the audience. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak under the open forum this evening? Seeing none, I'll go to the virtual audience. If there's anyone in the virtual audience that wishes to address council this evening, please use the raised hand feature and we can bring you into the meeting.
I'm not seeing any at this time.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the open forum portion. That brings us to delegations. We have one delegation this evening, Ms. Silver. If you would like to come forward and provide us with your presentation. Same thing. Just make sure the red light's on so that we can hear you.
Okay, yes, I have some concerns. I've been trying to address a few of them through this process for the last little while, but it's pretty hard to get through this process. I used to be able to come here and speak, as I've sat here for 16 years now, watching the budget and everything. And now through latest bylaws, I can't speak unless I get on the agenda ahead of time, and then I have to submit all this information. I don't have time for all this. So I have now had to sit down, go over a few things that need to be addressed here on concerns of our residents in the village of Bath. As you know, I ran in the last elections. I own a hair salon in downtown, the village of Bath, for the last 32 years. So information comes to me all the time. This isn't just my concerns that I am about the village of Bath. Our community needs to be represented in some way that they're heard. So I'm going to bring forward a couple issues tonight, and I will be here almost at every meeting with the concerns the village of Bath has until we're heard. So if all I can do is speak tonight and be here on this video so people hear that we're heard, you guys are going to have to listen one way or another. Whether you want to help in these situations, it'll be up to you guys from now on. So one of the issues I have, and I brought forth to our mayor before is our park that we have, the tennis courts that I've worked in the parks since 2006 to try to help our parks, which are a huge part of our community that we all get to go and relax in. Over the years, things have gone good in our parks and things have gone bad. We lost the skateboard park years ago that I was working for a long time to work on. And now we have an issue with kids with skateboards on the main street of Bath. They have no place else to take their skateboards. So now it's becoming a safety issue on the downtown streets of Bath with all the trucks going through. What I have looked at is, and that we have it in the township, is opening up pathways through the village down into the park. That way people from the golf course would be able to come down into the village without going around the main street, which is a safety hazard now, and come down and use our village. It'd be half the distance for them. It would help all the businesses and it'd help the kids get to school through pathways down to the schoolyard that they wouldn't have to go around the main streets where all these big trucks are and everything. This could be done very easily because the township already owns these properties. I've been down there at the park. We also had an issue that we put trees into that park by the tennis courts. And as the mayor knows, I had concerns with the trees were all being overgrown with grass and we were losing them all, at least half of them. I took it upon myself to clean up the trees with my hands. It took me 3 weeks. We now have 320 trees now that are going to live in that park. There's probably about 500 that we've lost. Grass has gone over, but hopefully we will get more trees and I'll replant them back in that park. I'd like that park opened up so that it goes from Academy into that park. There's also other walkways that can be opened up now that we have all these developments down there. They need to get into the village other ways and around all the streets so that people can use the downtown businesses. So if we could look at opening up those parkways, walkways, they're on, there's one on First Street. There's one Academy on the end of Lodge that goes down into the park. That way people can utilize the parks and the businesses more. So a lot of seniors live at the golf course. They can't walk all that way from the golf course down into the community. They have to drive. So let's look at ways, as we did down at the marina area, open up the parkways in the middle of the marina areas that got opened up years later through the houses. Let's open them up now so the kids can get off the main streets and have some place they can go play instead of on the main streets. The other issue that has been a huge concern of mine, and it was in the last elections too, and it continues to be a huge concern of the community and the downtown businesses, is the speeding trucks and cars that go through every day. You were just at a town hall meeting and it was brought up to you by a person that just moved there not too long about the speeding trucks. He wanted to know if you could defer them around. As we know, we can't defer them around. So there is other solutions that we could do. We could lower the kilometers from 50 kilometers to 40 kilometers an hour. I am sitting on the main street. The street goes around my house. My house rumbles as these big trucks go by. They are going 80 kilometers an hour. They are going so fast. We have no police on the main street that watch it. There's going to be an accident soon. My corner on Lodge Street and Main Street is where the children get on the bus and the trucks go around them. We'll have two dually trucks with trailers going both ways at the same time. They're not going 50 kilometers an hour. They're going 70 at least. I watched yesterday morning from 7 to 7:30. There was at least 10 speeders that went by my place. Like, it needs to be stopped. That's money that can come back into the revenue of our system, and it needs to be stopped before somebody gets hurt. So I contacted, there's a person that's bought a bunch of properties in the main, down on the main street, just below me, a bunch of the businesses. I contacted him and he was very happy that I'm bringing this forth to the township. He's contacted the head of the Business Society in Bath, and they're all behind me and want you to know that something needs to be done before somebody gets hurt, because it's a big problem. We have two speeding signs that tell you what your speed is coming into the village. We have three, actually. One down by the school that still works. The two on both ends on the east side and the west side don't work. They don't run. today I was coming in down into the village of Bath, down the hill on the main street. And I was following a Dornicamp double trailer truck, which I've watched speed through the village many times now. I get behind him, follow him down to the red light. He drives right through it. He couldn't stop. He was going too fast coming down the hill. I put on my horn so the person coming the other way stopped and didn't come out, and there wasn't a big accident. I followed the truck to Lafarge. I went in and talked to the head of Lafarge that looks after this. His name is Cody Allen, you know, probably from the Lafarge meetings. He said, we have a counselor and a mayor that sits on, they weren't at the last meeting. Lafarge didn't know there was an issue with the speeding trucks. They have only got one complaint in the last year about speeding trucks. They are behind us, the businesses, the downtown, 100% to help anything they can do to slow the traffic down. So now I'm here to tell you guys, you have to be upon this. The OPP has already been informed. I informed them a while ago. They know, but they still haven't started by doing anything. Before something happens to a child or something, and you guys all need to, for Urso, I'll get the signs working because they belong to the township, as the OPP has said. Put cameras on them. Put the kilometers down to 40 as they did in Deserano before somebody gets hurt, because that's the only way you're going to slow those trucks down before something happens. Anyways, that's all I can say right now. The Business Association and Lafarge wants me to get back to them tomorrow to see what happens here and where we can step forward on this to start doing something before something happens. All right. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none, we'll need a motion. There's one here to receive. If anyone wants to add any action items, they can. What motion would like to be brought forward? Councillor Willis.
Move to receive the delegation.
Received, so moved. Seconded by Councillor Broderick. Mover, any comments?
No, not at this time.
Seconder?
None.
Anyone else? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you, Guy. That concludes the delegations, and we're on to items for consideration. Delegation of authority. We have finance coming forward. Any additional information that needs to be shared at this time?
No, we're here for any questions.
Thank you. So we have the report and the recommendation before us. Council, would someone like to put a motion on the floor? Councillor Willis.
Move that the report from the Finance Division, November 12th, 2024, redelegation of authority for S.357-1D1 for tax relief applications be received, and that council delegate authority to the Assessment Review Board to determine eligibility for property tax reductions or refunds under the Municipal Act 2001, Section 357-1D1, sickness or extreme poverty, and that bylaw 2024-93, a bylaw to delegate authority to the Assessment Review Board to exercise certain powers and functions of council pursuant to Section 357-1D1 of the Municipal Act 2001 be enacted and passed.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Budrick. Any comments from the mover? Seconder? Other members? Councillor Broderick.
Through your worship, just a couple of, just for my own information. How many applications might we, like in a general sense, do you get 1, 2, 10, few?
Through your worship to council, this is a very rare occasion. Even in the bigger municipalities, they may only get a couple in a year. And this would be like, we're talking Mississauga size, so it's not a very common thing and hence part of the problem of determination.
Okay, and just if I could follow up with, so what's the composition of the assessment review board? Like who's on it?
Through you, your worship. That is usually appointed by the province of Ontario, so there are different members that come, and it changes through different times. So I don't have the names today.
So in the rare case of a entity applying for an assessment, it actually isn't done at the township level, it's done at the ministry level?
Correct. That's what the recommendation is that it be delegated to the ARB so that they would be able to take a look at, because they get different municipalities, they've been delegated to other cases. They will have something that they can do a comparison with, rather than us doing it when it's, as the deputy treasurer has indicated, it would be a one-off and it wouldn't be very often. We wouldn't have something to compare it to. So it makes more sense for them too. Thank you.
Any other comments? Back to the mover for final. Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you. Next is the water and sewer rate study and financial plans. Welcome. Is there any additional information to be shared at this time?
So through your worship, I just, we can actually address one of the comment that Mr. Lalonde made. And we can do that in a second. I wanted to also say that Mr. Mirabella is on hand as well to answer questions about the water and sewer rate study, if there are any questions. But I will ask the manager of engineering and environment to respond to the one comment regarding comparison of the rate with different municipalities.
Okay. Please proceed.
So through you, your worship, at this time, staff are not proposing to do the review of other neighboring municipalities, but one thing we are bringing forward in the capital budget, which should be starting next week, is the system connection feasibility study. So one of the items that we frequently talk about is the fact that as a small municipality, we have 4 treatment plants to operate and run for our various systems. And so that can add costs quite quickly when you're looking at economies of scale and having to manage a small number of connections with that many plants. So the connection feasibility study that we are proposing was identified through the infrastructure master plan, which council adopted back in the summer. And it would look at the potential for eliminating the Bath sewage treatment plant and installing a sewage pumping station to send those flows to the Amherst View wastewater treatment plant. And so by doing that, we'd eliminate some of those operating costs and hopefully be able to realize those cost savings to bring us, bring the rates down ultimately over time.
Thank you. Question for clarification?
Question for you, just to you, Luke. Would that impact anything we do with Corrections Canada with the wastewater in that situation? Just curious, because I know that's the biggest issue we usually have with that facility.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would need to look at the agreements that we have in place with CSC to manage their flows and how that would be done. And that would be part of the scope of this feasibility study, would be what are the implications of this change and how might that affect CSC? We also have agreements in place in the Village of Bath with developers who own capacity. So we would need to look at those agreements as well and ultimately weigh out all the different components of the sort of the non-technical side, so those agreements, but also the technical side, like the cost to expand the Amherst View plant and what that might cost versus just continuing, I'll say, status quo at Bath and weigh out all those different options to make sure that if we are going down that path of eliminating one plant, we will recognize cost savings.
Thank you for that information. So, Councillor Willis.
Just further to what the manager was talking about. So we know that part of the reason that our rates are so high is because we run separate facilities that we inherited when we amalgamated. You're talking about the sewers. Is there any possibility that we could amalgamate to one water system as well?
The water side is a little bit more tricky. It is something we've sort of done some high-level analysis over time. Part of the issue is our current water treatment plant facilities are on very constrained footprints. And so while we do have the ability to expand those plants have limited capacity and there's no real room to sort of expand outward to increase that. And so because our sites are so constrained, I would be hesitant to allocate all that capacity from, say, Bath to the Fairfield plant in Amherstview, because then 5 years down the road, we're not able to expand that plant further to account for future growth. And then we're sort of back to square one where we're scratching our heads wondering how to expand our plants. So it's a bit of a different situation where the Amherstview sewage facility, we own a lot of land there and we have that ability to expand from just a footprint perspective, whereas the Fairfield site and the Bath site are both very constrained for water purposes.
Thank you, through the mayor, to Mr. McDonald. Just a concern, that's a lot of piping to go in from Bath to Amherstview. Is that going to be a cost-effective option? Like, I know you're talking about looking at the costs versus expenses, or the revenues, I guess, that would be generated. Is it normal to pump sewage that far? And is there an environmental concern if the pipes break?
So currently we do it in our system right now for the Fairfield system. So we pump sewage flows from Odessa to the Amherstview site. And that was actually a change that was made back in, I'll say, early mid 2000s. MJ would obviously know a bit better than I would. But it was for similar reasons where we were operating two plants historically in Odessa, but they were constrained from a capacity perspective. So by sending those flows to the Amherstview plants, we were able to, one, allow future growth in the system, and then two, also recognize operational cost savings. From an environmental perspective, certainly all the new pipes in the ground are undergoing rigorous testing for pressure ratings and everything else to make sure that there would not be any leaks. Obviously, we can never be 100%, but we are following the stringent of requirements to make sure that we're doing everything possible to avoid that.
Councillor Prager.
I could ask, through you, your worships, a few questions on the report. Page 18. I'm just curious, Mr. McDonald, table 1, there's, my eyes going here, under debt payments. I'm just interested that it, it's fairly consistent. And then in 2029, we have quite a, almost $100,000 drop there. I'm just wondering if you could, maybe in a general sense, give me an idea what that's reflecting.
So through your worship, we're going to pass on that question to Mr. Marabella.
Through the mayor, thanks for the question. So there are some debt payments that are coming offline throughout the period. And if you give me a few moments, I can probably check which of the specific payments it's referring to. But in general, there are debt that's been retiring over the period, and we're making sure that we're capturing any debt retirement into our fiscal capacity to kind of, move that into other operating costs or to fund the other services in that program. So we're tracking all the debt over the planning period.
Me,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. So then it is anticipated then in the following year, we're taking on more debt, given that it goes back up?
Correct. There are pressures in the capital program in which, in order to kind of maintain more sustainable reserve funds and kind of keep it within the policy targets, we have triggered some additional debt financing requirements in order to carry out that capital. So in order to manage those reserve funds and keep stabilized rates, there are debt financing requirements in the planning period. I will note that obviously the debt requirements and the measures are going to be subject to council discretion at the time of the project. So there might be sufficient funds in the reserve fund at that point in time, or those projects might be deferred. But in terms of the capital plan to carry it out as it stands today, we've assumed some debt financing measures to carry out everything.
Okay, and if, just to continue back on to page 23, I think you've already answered the question, or sorry, it's page, 23. The date, or sorry, in figure 6, obviously then that, what would you call that? Tan band then is that debt coming in right there for that 1 year. That sort of answered that question.
That's
And I
absolutely
just,
correct.
the last one, and I think it's, give me a second here, page 32 on your report. And again, this is something that maybe at a different level than this, but just the concept of the water and sewage for the CSC agreement at 3% as opposed to maybe the rest of the township. I just wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, and I can partly comment, then might flip it back to staff to kind of provide some insight. There's a little bit of a different arrangement on the CSEs in terms of tracking their revenues, and we've done it on a revenue basis, not necessarily a rate increase basis. So it depends on their flows, and it's also relative to their share of costs of the overall system. So we've tried to track based on historical trends what their future revenues are going to look like, and their rates have kind of haven't maintained always with the township's rate schedule. There's been a pause on rate increases in the last couple of years. So just, we've tried to be cognizant of trying to be conservative what those revenues are going to look like that are going to fund the system. But I don't know if staff have any comment on the specific arrangements, because I know we discussed some elements, and there's kind of some agreements related to how those charges are put out and funded each year.
Yeah, so through your worship, I can certainly provide a little bit more insight in that. So CSC paid for the construction of the facility, originally both water and wastewater. And with that construction, there's agreements in place that discuss how we are to recoup the cost from them. And it is completely based on the cost of operating the facilities. And the other factor is the volume of water that we distribute to them, and also the volume of sewage that we treat every year. And they pay for a percentage of that. Typically, they will pay between 48 and 51% of the cost of operating the plant on the water side and on the sewage side. So the village, the rest of the customers are responsible for the rest of the costs. For capital work, they are responsible for the same percentage of the cost, the direct cost of construction for capital work.
Just one more, and this is more of a comment, and it's referring to something I want to ask a question about. Okay. Will I be allowed to make a comment later?
After the motion's on the floor, yes.
I'll save it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm relaxing the rules a little bit right now to make sure we have all the information before we pass a motion. So that's why I'm trying to keep the comments until after a motion's on the floor. Councillor Parks, and then I'll go to Councillor Willis. Sorry.
Oh, there it is. Oh, thank you. Through the mayor to staff, as we all know, this is a contentious issue. It's been for years and years and years. A couple of questions that I had, and I'm hoping staff can answer them, is there's 4 plants operated by the township. How many households in Loyalist Township actually use the plant services? So Loyalist Township is comprised of roughly 18,000 people, give or take. Not all those people are on municipal services. So would it be 20% of the population? Would it be 30%? Or is there a house number that you could provide?
So through your worship, it's a great question. We're kind of discussing, because we did do a little bit of an analysis on that, and it turns out that roughly 70% of the properties in the township is connected to water and wastewater. That was a shocking figure as well. That was a good question.
Thank you. If I can follow up.
Yes.
So we've talked about capacity and the allotments that have been sold to the developers. Would it be correct in assuming that as those developers develop those properties and then come into the system, that there'll be more economies of scale that would be happening? Because even though there'll be more consumption and more treatment, it would make sense that there would be some economy still because you're increasing the number of people that are actually using the services.
Sure, I can go first and then anyone else can feel free to jump in. There's a couple different pieces that I would break down when we're looking at sort of the growth component. And so that's first would be how growth was handled historically in Bath, which was developers paid for the plant expansions. And so they own that capacity. And so how the system grows is actually funded a little bit differently than how it is funded now, where a developer comes in and they pay impost fees, and that funds the expansion of the plants. But certainly when you're talking about as we add connections that will drive down the sort of average cost for operating, I think that point is valid. And then there's components that interact with that as well, which are we can also reduce the water consumption per household, which we've seen over the municipality. So that means we can sort of extend out the plant's available capacity over more and more households based on as households are coming in and we're using less water per household, which is more cost effective for everyone. So we've seen benefits from the change to higher variable rate consumption and less fixed rate consumption by seeing, when I say, sorry, fixed rate price, by seeing that water consumption sort of go down and down, and we see that sort of average out over more users. So I think you're definitely right there. And then just on the growth aspect, as the plants grow, that is one thing we are trying to balance, which is at some point, we're going to have to expand our plants to accommodate new developments, and that's all funded by the impost fees and the connection fees. But we don't want to do that too early, so that way we're operating a plant that has, way more capacity, and it's very inefficient. And I'm sure Sean on the operations side could speak to that. It's not a great situation to be in. And so another piece of that is we are bringing forward the capacity allocation policy to council. I'm hoping to bring that forward at actually next council meeting. So you'll see that as well, which will give us more tools in the toolbox to sort of manage that capacity that's available and allow us to sort of, I'll say, stack up more and more connections into the capacity we have before we have to expand a plant, which is still regulated by the MECP.
Councillor Willis.
Through the chair. Could you speak about how much of these costs are within our control versus mandated by the legislation that we have to follow? If council said to you, reduce these costs by 10%, is that possible even at all, given what Sean's responsible to do and report on?
So through you, your worship, this is a team effort, as you can see. So high level response to this is this council has a responsibility to make sure that the plants are running compliance with legislation, and that it is financed accordingly, including, asset replacement. So with that in mind, yes, there's always efficiencies that can be found in operating the systems. You're going to see the budget presentation in the next couple of weeks. There's been some changes that have been made in operations to reduce the cost, such as bringing the locates in-house, because the service provider was charging us way more than historically. Reorganizing the operation structure as well, which reduced one position. So we're always looking for efficiencies. But yes, for sure, we're always looking at cost savings in that point, but the main point is, you know, we do have to make sure that we have these facilities to run, and we have to make sure that they're financially sustained.
Any other questions for clarification at this time? Sean? Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead. There was a part two of that.
Just to follow up for you, Mr. Mayor. So just to piggyback off what MJ had said there. So our operational costs are, very much dictated by the industry-wide, chemicals and other sorts of contracted services that we hire. Our costs are increasing, as well as much of, inflation has been throughout the whole economy. And it is a little bit different with an industrial type, setting that we have with industrial type chemicals, i.e. Alum, chlorine, these types of things. Industry-wide, those are increasing way faster than inflation. So when you see inflation on the TV at 3%, whatnot, that's a different mix of inflationary, items that they've made that calculation. An industrial type lens on it, it's way higher. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but we are kind of held captive with that. Like chlorine is one of our main chemicals that we use, obviously, for treating drinking water. Alum would be another one for our wastewater treatment. And we are kind of at captive for those increases, and really have no real way around it. But that all being said, we are constantly, and I know staff constantly we're reviewing our processes. We're looking at our, where we can cut, where we can use new technologies to help with some efficiencies. And we are starting to see some of those come to fruit over the last year, and I look forward to this year as well.
Thank you. I apologize for cutting you off. So any other questions for clarification? Councillor Budrick.
Just back to something through, sir, that Councillor Parks had said. She mentioned the question about piping from Bath to the Emersu facility. Have we had any kind of just, I guess, top level kind of thoughts on what a project like that may cost, include, time frame, anything like that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of a time frame, I won't sugarcoat it. It will be a very long process because obviously it would involve plant expansion, construction of a pumping station, force mains, everything. So it would be, on the order of magnitude 10 plus years to sort of work our way through that. It would start with that feasibility study, as we've mentioned, and then we would go into preliminary and detailed design and so on, and make our way through the regulatory process. In terms of costing, we have done some very preliminary high-level estimates when it was related to industrial servicing in the business park and trying to make sewer it to the way out there. It's not a cheap option either. I don't have those numbers on hand, so I don't want to throw out anything that's not accurate at this time. But it's certainly not a cheap option. But the benefit is, this infrastructure would last 50 plus years, and we would obviously, with maintenance and upkeep and all the operating, and we would be able to make those long-term improvements and realize those gains over time. And there's a lot of different options that would ultimately need to be assessed. So one of the biggest ones would be, can we get an easement from CSC? Because running our pipes across their land would be a lot shorter of a distance than having to go either on Highway 33 and up. So there's different things like that need to be considered. There's also things like the outlet from the Amherst View wastewater treatment plant. Right now it goes through the Bayview Bog. There's a historic study in there that identified the upset limit for discharge from the plant to the Bayview Bog at around 9,000 and something cubic meters per day. And we would need to see if we're sending the bath flows there. Do we exceed that limit? Does that mean we need to then install an outfall to Lake Ontario, and all these different options would need to be looked at? And so it's hard to put an exact figure on it, because one thing, if we can get the CSC item resolved, that might save us a bunch of money, but this outfall might end up being necessary, which then increases our costs. And there's all these different ups and downs that would need to be looked at from a technical perspective to resolve that answer.
Councillor Parks.
Thank you, through the mayor. This may be a little premature. My concern, or one of the things that was a concern, I guess, when they put the treatment plant in with CSC was connecting to the existing systems in Loyalist and the creek, Millhaven Creek. How would that, I know this is a more technical question, but how would that be dealt with? Because
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So creek crossings are not uncommon. So they're more expensive, obviously. Typically, you can look at doing it a number of ways, but you would probably look at something like horizontal directional drilling. So you're boring under the creek at a specified depth, and you would need to involve a hydrogeologist likely to make sure that you're not impacting the creek and taking all the necessary environmental measures. So that does increase costs, certainly, but they are, again, they're not uncommon. We have a couple creek crossings in Odessa that spring to mind immediately. So under the bridge, we have the water main on Main Street, and then there's also a gravity sewer and a forest main that go under the creek in Odessa by the Babcock Mills as well, one of which was installed in the early 2000s when those upgrades were made that I mentioned previously. So certainly they're technically more challenging, but there's solutions there.
Any other questions at this time? I just have one. Just to confirm, the numbers that we've got before us tonight are the best that we've come up with the data that we've gleaned historically, and then looking for projected growth and everything. But in the past, it's always been reviewed annually and brought back to council for the accurate needs for the next year for rates. And I'm assuming, and I was just looking for confirmation if that was going to continue in the future.
So yes, your worship. So tonight, though, the resolution will pass the rates for 2025, but that's correct, subsequent years. So the study covers 5 years. Subsequent years, we would come back to council annually for the next year's rate. And it comes with an analysis of where we at as far as expenses, as far as revenues, as far as reserves as well, because it looks at the whole picture. And then the rates would be proposed at that time. But tonight, if the rates are accepted and the bylaw is passed, it passes the rates for 2025.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's no further questions for clarification, I'd look to council. We have the report before us with the recommendation. How does council wish to proceed? Councillor Progress.
I'd be prepared to move the recommendation, Your Worship, that the report from the Economic Growth and Community Development Services dated November 12, 2024, re 2025 water and sewer user rate study and financial plans be received, and that the financial plan is presented for the Fairfield and Bath water systems be approved by council, deeming the water systems financially viable, and that the financial plan is presented for the Loyalist East and Bath sewer systems be approved by council, and that the water financial plan be filed with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing by November 15th, 2024 deadline, and that bylaw 2024-96 being a bylaw respecting 2025 water and sewer user rates in Loyalist Township be enacted and passed.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Willis. Mover, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a few comments in general. Council's responsibility is that our residents have safe drinking water, and I'm old enough to remember Walkerton, and I've been through in my brief, I guess 2 years now, I've been through all the water plants, been through the sewage plants. They're scoring 100% on their testing and their evaluations in the ministry. And although I guess the 5-10-year plan says 5%, I think that's been answered that that'll come back annually. And I would say this, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on any previous council, but we need to prepare for infrastructure failure and to put money aside. And in this plan, it does say that, you know, the capital things are the prices we really can't change. And, you know, I was in Calgary with the deputy there in June when they had a major failure of their system. So we've got to keep our system at standard, up to grade, and continuously investing in the capital side of it. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Seconder? Any other comments? Councillor Boudreau.
Coming in because this is one of the top two things that I get people complaining to me about. I was on the fence and even thinking about voting against it, but listening to our staff tonight answer the questions that I had and other councillors had. I know it's a large increase, but as Councillor Product said, it's something we need to do to maintain our facilities and our drinking water. So I will support it tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Parks.
I too had been sitting on the fence on this. It is a very hot topic when we talk about water and sewer rates, and it is very hard when you compare your rates to other municipalities, but you're not comparing apples to apples, unfortunately, and it would be nice to be able to have those rates that those other communities have. And I was going to vote against it, but I have been swayed with the support of staff and their report. And again, being reminded of our responsibilities to ensure that we have safe drinking water, that I will vote for the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor.
Again, to piggyback on the previous comment about comparators and comparing apples to apples, which is difficult. One thing to keep in mind about Greater Napanee that our staff wouldn't be at liberty to refer to, but I'm happy to, is the town of Greater Napanee got $34.8 million from the provincial government this year to upgrade their systems. We're not as lucky in Loyalist presently, and our users are having to pay for us being responsible stewards of our system, and that just is what it is.
Thank you, staff, for answering all of the questions. Now we're on to the fire apparatus budgetary adjustment. Chief is coming forward. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Council.
Do you have any additional information to share at this time, or just here to answer questions?
I just want to highlight, this is just the basic equipment and things to get the trucks on the road. The majority of all the firefighting equipment, the hoses, everything else, we are transitioning from the old trucks that are going out of service onto the new trucks. So this is just the basic needs to get those trucks going. But happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do you have questions for clarification? Councillor Parks.
Sorry, thank you through the mayor. And I'm sorry, I can't pull the report up. It's just not there. These are just replacements of existing apparatuses.
Yeah, that's correct. These are the two trucks that were approved last year, I believe, for this year's budget.
Any other questions for clarification? Council, we have the report with the recommendations before us. Would someone like to put a motion on the floor? Councillor Boudreau, sorry. I'm looking the right direction.
The report from Emergency Services Department dated November 12th, 2024, RE fire apparatus budgetary adjustment be received, and that council approved the transfer of $54,349.42 from the capital reserves to fund the additional fire apparatus capital budget costs.
So move. seconded by Counselor Willis. Mover, any comments? Seconder? Anyone else? Call a question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you, Chief. Lennox and Addington County Accessibility Transportation Correspondence. To the Clerk's Department. Is there any additional information that you wish to provide at this time?
Through you, Your Worship, I just want to notify Council of a slight proposed amendment. I have spoken with the Secretary of the committee, who's the Clerk of Lennox and Addington, on what they're looking for with the motion that was passed by the committee. And I did get some clarification. So they're not looking for staff to do any further investigation. They're looking to see what is already available in the 4 lower tier municipalities. So I do have a change to the proposed recommendation that's in the agenda, and the Deputy Clerk is going to pull that up.
Okay, thank you. That answered most of my questions right there. Okay. So it's on the screen, Council. We want to take a quick look. Okay. That's better. Councilor Broderick. Okay, do you mind?
No, not at all. That council directs staff to provide details about the available accessible transportation options available in the township to the Lennox and Addington County Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that staff be directed to participate in any future discussions about potential opportunities for partnerships.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Parks. Mover, any comments?
Yes, Your Worship. Anytime we can partnership with anybody, especially our focus with our recent expansion, I guess, of our transportation options is something we should be looking for.
You. Seconder, any further comments? Anyone else? Call a question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Next is motion regarding alcohol sales in grocery stores. It's a relatively long one. Do we have that to put up on the screen? Thank you. And are you going to scroll through it slowly so everyone at home can see it as well? Okay, thank you. Thank you. So council, it's the same motion that's in our agenda, but it's been shared there. So if someone wants to make a motion on this, rather than reading it all, we can just simply state as shared on the screen and in the agenda. Deputy Mayor.
I would move to support the motion and pass the resolution.
So moved, seconded by Councilor Broderick. Mover, any comments?
Yes, I sit on the board of Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington Public Health. I guess there's no way of avoiding the political nature of this topic, but the government's current policy around alcohol and the sale of alcohol in independent grocery stores and corner stores is counter to all the available and substantial public health evidence about the adverse health impacts to society of alcohol. And I think the government needs to rethink it. Their own Chief Medical Officer of Health, our own Dr. Kieran Moore in his annual report, Balancing Act, which I encourage everyone to read for some good bedside reading, details it far better than I can articulate it. But I think where this motion is going is in the right direction, and in fairness to the government, they have shown ability to listen when the public has pushed back, and I think this is something to push back on.
Thank you. Seconder, any comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my comment would be this, that I was driving home from a hockey game the other night along the 401 and stopped to get gas wherever, one of the en routes, and they were selling alcohol. And I thought, I was thinking of our township and how many times our emergency services go to the 401, our OPP goes out to the 401, and you know, in our general area, the 401, how much trouble that causes for the, let's say, the residents of Odessa, who for hours will watch transport trucks go up and down. So that is something I can't equate that, you know, raising the speed limit and let's sell some booze on the side, just, you know, whatever, that it doesn't make any sense to me. And my only, I guess, proviso and concern of this is that we have some places in the township that already have, over a number of years maybe, established sale of alcohol with a gas bar, and that, to my knowledge, have been very responsible with their sales, that maybe, and I don't know if I'm doing this properly, but maybe prohibit the sale of alcohol in gas stations at 400 level, you know, just as I don't want to punish our local people who have shown they can do things.
Good point.
I don't know if that needs a rewording here or not, but.
If you want to do a friendly amendment, you can. I think, personally, I think the motion covers it, probably, but it's up to you if you wish to make one. Councillor Willis.
Further what Councillor Broderick just said, so we do have 2 established businesses in the township that have been doing this for a long time, but they've been doing it as LCBO licensees, which means they have skin in the game, they have something to lose. They take great care in making sure that they're following the rules. So I would make a friendly amendment that number 4 says prohibit the sale of alcohol at gas stations except as provided by LCBO licensees.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling to number 4. Okay. And I think that might address Councillor Broderick's as well. Okay, so you're proposing a friendly amendment. I'll ask the mover, consider friendly, seconder, consider friendly. Thank you. We'll include that. Just look to the clerk's department. Did we get the wording okay on that? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Willis. Do you have any further comment? None? Any other comments? Councillor Budrick.
A couple comments. One, I'd like to see if I could throw another friendly amendment out on number 3, that no alcohol be permitted within 300 meters of a school daycare or substance use facility. Just that 150 meters is less than 500 feet. That it's too easy. I think it should be set a little further. One, and the other is I do know as much as it is a health thing. Don't want to hurt local businesses. I do know that Foodland is selling about $10,000 a month of spirits, and they're seeing 3 to 5 times uptick in business associated with the person that is actually buying the alcohol. I'd like to make sure that everyone is aware of that.
Thank you. Any other comment? Councillor Parks.
I too will support the friendly amendment. I think that is,
Shoot, sorry. There was a friendly amendment on the floor. If you can just, I'll check with the mover. Is it friendly? Second, no, there was the 300 meter. Sorry, I just want to make sure we're speaking to the seconder, considered friendly. Okay, so that's included, and the clerk's department. Have the numbers okay? Thank you. Please proceed. Sorry about that.
I'll be short. I was concerned again with the established community sale of alcohol through the LCBO, so I'm glad that has been amended and I will support it with both amendments.
Thank you. I believe everyone has spoken. Typically, as a chair, I try to stay fairly neutral, but I am going to speak on this one. I fully support it. The effects of alcohol on our healthcare system alone is astronomical. Not to mention in some social aspects as well. I try not to bring my day job into this position either, but Councillor Broderick did hit a concern of mine when I drove past an en route, and on the big billboard out front, it said beer here. Inappropriate. That's not local traffic. That's long distance travel typically. There is some commuter where people work a distance from home, but for the most part, that's not the local traffic that's going home from work, and they just want to pick up some spirits to have with their meal once they're home. So I think they need to rethink where is appropriate, where it's not appropriate, and how much can society actually endure. And I would just ask anyone that wonders why I take it so serious at the en routes and everything. Next time you're getting onto the 400 series highway, check the outside of the shoulders, the roundings, when you're getting on, and look at the number of bottles that are there, because they're on the freeway as well. You just don't see them at 110 or 130. So I fully support it as well. So with that, back to the mover, Deputy Mayor. No further. Call the question. All in favor. Motion has passed. Try to get the right item. 11.6. Motion for the redistribution of the provincial land transfer tax and GST to municipalities for sustainable future funding, infrastructure funding. We have another fairly lengthy motion. Do we have that as well to put up on the screen? Thank you. Thank you. Council, we can deal with this the way we did with the other one, if because it was on the screen and it's in the package, if rather than read it all, if anyone wants to make a motion, they can just refer to it as presented. Councillor Willis?
I'll move the motion as presented.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Booter. Mover, any comments?
Only that we hear about the challenges with establishing new housing in our communities, and infrastructure is that biggest challenge. And it's also one of the most expensive things that any township does. And we need help from the province to make that happen.
Seconder, any comments? Anyone else? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. And now I would take a motion for council to move into committee of the whole. Councillor Broderick, do you mind just reading the one-liner?
That council now resolved to move into committee of the whole.
Thank you. So moved. Seconded by Councillor Willis. All in favor? Motion is passed, and we'll just take a short 5-minute recess. So the next item is notice of motion. Do we have any notice of motion this evening? Seeing none, direct motion. Are there any direct motions to be presented this evening? Seeing none, consent agenda. So all the items in the consent agenda are lumped together because they're general nature. And any item that wishes to be extracted can be done so at the will of a council member. Otherwise, there is a recommendation with the consent agenda if we so choose. Council, how do you wish to proceed? Deputy Mayor.
I move that all items in the consent agenda dated November 12th, 2024 be approved as presented and that the necessary action be taken.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Broderick. Mover, any comments? Seconder? Any other members? Seeing none, I will just make one comment. Item 5.2. Just wanted to make note that there was an inspection at the Bath drinking water Bath drinking water system. And again, the township has received an inspection rating of 100% with the system, which speaks well for the operations and the staff that take care of the operations. So we thank staff for keeping the water. We've had quite a few 100% now, so that's great. Thank you. So with that, back to the mover for final. Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Announcements. Do we have any announcements this evening? Councillor Pryor.
Just one quick one. Councillor Buderick and I attended the Bath Legion Remembrance Day ceremony, and great turnout, and they've done a lot of work through the funding that they got through the township and through the funds.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Councillor Willis.
I had the pleasure of attending the Remembrance Day ceremony on Amherst Island, and it's always nice when Remembrance Day falls during the week because then the ceremony is planned and executed by the students of Amherst Island Public School, and they did a remarkable job, and there was a very good turnout.
Good. Thank you. I hope to be there next year to be able to enjoy it. Other members, anything else? I will just mention that I attended the Remembrance Day service at Wilton at the Cenotaph. This is organized by the Odessa and District Lions Club. And just a side note, Lion Mike Shabinsky, this was his 40th year of organizing it at Wilton. When he started, probably could have counted on your fingers how many people were attending. This year, there were over 300 in attendance, including 51 public school students from the Odessa Public School and 3 teachers. And for me, I really enjoyed seeing that, the impressionable age. I mean, the township has been making every effort to be able to engage with the students and to see them there so that they can observe, learn to appreciate the freedom that we have and how we got it, and to respect that freedom was very important for me to be able to witness that. Of course, they still had the flyover in formation. There would have been more, but the weather did not cooperate, and some of the planes decided to err on the side of caution. 74 wreaths were laid, and Mr. Shabinsky wanted me to also just mention that it was a coordinated effort with road closures and whatnot. So he wants to thank the township staff that were involved, OPP, the residents that were nearby, the Wilton Community Association, and the Canadian Forces School of Communications and Electronics. They all made this possible, and it was a good event with an awesome reception back at the palace afterwards. Always good when you have food. Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Parks.
Thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for the staff for hosting the townhouse or the town hall meetings that held in the township recently. Also to the deputy and the mayor for their presentations and being there. And also to the residents for coming out.
Good engagement. That's great. Any other? Councillor Willis.
Also, I'd like to congratulate the Amherstview Lions Club on another successful Christmas parade. And I
Yes.
still haven't seen Santa because we're always at the front, but it was very nice to see all the people that came out for that day.
Thank you. Any other items? Being none, confirmatory bylaw. Can I have a motion? Somebody read the recommendation. Deputy Mayor.
I move that bylaw 2024-97 to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Loyalist Township be enacted and passed, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and seal.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Willis. Any comments? Call question on favor. Motion is passed. And a motion to adjourn. Do I have a mover? Councillor Budrick, seconded by Councillor Prodrick. All in favor? Motion is passed. We are adjourned at 8:04.